Bonjour à tous. Welcome to the Los Angeles conference. Hi, my name is Marie-Josée Lachance. I'm head of the strategic partnerships at Real by Fake, a VFX studio with offices in Montreal and Los Angeles. We were supposed today to have a conversation on AI between Marc Côté, founder and CEO at Real by Fake, and Yves Bergquist, AI researcher, director of project on AI blockchain in media at USC's Entertainment Technology Center, and also the co-founder, and CEO at CortoAI. Unfortunately, Mark won't be able to join us today, but we are lucky. Yves proposed us to share with us the latest result of his research on the physics of stories and people. Thank you, Yves. Have a great presentation.
Thank you. Okay. So, as Marie-Josée mentioned, I work at, I'm an AI researcher at the Entertainment Technology Center in Los Angeles. ETC is a research center in US, in think tank at USC, funded by all the Hollywood studios and a bunch of large technology companies. And what we do is we research and develop AI solutions for large industry problems. The entertainment industry is a technology industry, contrary to what most people think, including in the industry, and it's a very data-rich industry. But the data that it has, whether it's content or conversations about the content or performance data, is generally very unstructured. And so it's a very good place to apply machine learning to turn unstructured data into structured data. My project is divided in currently 4 focuses. The first one is what we call content genomics, right? So there's an enormous amount of content produced by the media industry, not just here, but all around the world. And that content is very unstructured. And there's a big effort on our end to try to extract structured attributes from this unstructured content. The project called Vid2Vec. And what we do there is we try to use AI machine learning to understand the narrative structures of film and TV and also advertising content, looking at all of the different parts and pieces that participate into the narrative, right? Whether it's the emotional tonalities of the characters or the colors, the edit pace, and all of the attributes that make film, TV, and advertising content. The second focus is audience genomics, and the project is called Geist. And Geist is a project to try to understand the math of virality and looking at networks and language on social media. We have recently added blockchain to our list of priorities. The idea there is there's a lot of processes in the media industry that are very manual, and that could be automated through blockchain. And so we're looking at a couple of things that are of interest. And the last focus is standards. ETC traditionally is a place where we discuss and think about technical standards and ethical standards, in this case around AI, for the entire media industry. So that's a big part of what we do. One of the things that is unique in what we do is we use a set of methods that is not commonly used. So we use a mix of methods that everybody uses, deep learning, but we use it in combination with other methods that are a little bit more rare in AI research. Things like information theory, algebraic topology, network science, evolutionary meta learning, probabilistic logic are all areas of AI that are not traditionally part of the machine learning mix. So, and through using these methods and trying to be a little bit creative about how we approach these problems, we've made several discoveries. that I want to talk about. The first one is that narrative structures, stories are very algorithmic in how they get built and consumed by the human mind. If you take a screenwriting lesson here in Hollywood, the first thing you hear is stories are a set of steps to solve a problem, and that's a very algorithmic process, right? So algorithms are a set of steps to solve problems. And so what we've been able to do is we've been able to extract a lot of attributes directly from the script or the video that allow us to derive very structured narrative attributes of a story. As I mentioned, symbols, emotional tonalities, narrative domains. Here you see the simplified narrative algorithm for The Godfather, where scene by scene we're able to understand what the scene is about, what the main character is about, what various characters are about, relationship between these characters are about, along a set of very structured attributes, right? So here, understanding, obtaining, doing, learning, there's a lot more attributes, but the idea behind this is to be able to create a machine language for how we can understand narratives at a very, very granular level, right? So right now, we understand narrative at a very broad level, the level of genre. The idea is to be able to understand narrative from a machine perspective at a much more granular level. The second discovery is what I mentioned in looking at audiences across social media. And the good thing about the media industry is that audiences are very passionate. So there's a lot of data, there's a lot of conversations out there about media content. The other focus of our research is what we call viral pathways. And it's the ability to understand communities on the digital communities and really understand the mechanics of influence between one another. What communities are more influential in activating certain communities? What does it take to activate various communities, and so on and so forth. And to do that, we're using a mix of content network analysis and natural language processing to be able to understand the network dynamics behind influence online. We all know that some people are influential, some communities are influential in influencing other people. We are trying to put some math behind why are certain people and communities more influential, and it really goes way beyond obviously the amount of followers that they have, but really what topics and what language and what emotions are more effective at activating certain communities. And we've made a third discovery, which is looking at the complexity of narrative and how the complexity of narrative is material or not to success. So information theory is a domain of math that can quantify the amount of information in a message. And what we are trying to do is we're trying to put together we're trying to flesh out a hypothesis that we can measure the amount of story and the amount of complexity that there is within a certain narrative, how much story is there inside a story, and trying to understand how material that is to success in the media industry, not just in TV and film, but also in advertising. So that's an ongoing interest of ours, is trying to apply information theory to narrative. One of the things that we've developed based on that is a metric of how unique your content is within a specific genre, within a specific year, within a specific context. Here we looked at the Amazon Studios show The Boys, looking at what we call its comparables. The comp set is the comparable set of The Boys, that all the films and TV shows that are from their own DNA, the most similar to The Boys. So we have a database of around 700,000 titles that if you run your script through our database, we're going to be able to come up with the 10, 20, 30 titles that are the closest in their DNA to your title. So in this case, the boys narrative DNA is closest to Deadpool, Kingsman, Predator, Looper, Black Mirror, Stranger Things, Dexter, etc. And then we can measure how unique the boys is how unique is the narrative of the boys compared to the content. And here you see that it's not that unique compared to other titles such as Kingsman, Cabin in the Woods, Kill Bill Volume 2, American Horror Story, Stranger Things, that are a lot more unique. And we think that there may be a relationship between how unique your content is, how much it stands out, and how powerful and successful it is in an environment where there's just an enormous amount of content that is being consumed. So it's a lot harder for content to stand out. So the more unique your content is, the more likely it is to stand out, and more likely it is to be successful. And we're trying to test that theory out right now. Part of our mix is a sentiment analysis engine that can extrapolate sentiment across 60 different dimensions of emotional tonalities. So we're trying to go beyond positive, negative sentiment into, how insecure, stressed, anxious, neurotic. This is from a scene in The Wolf of Wall Street, and this is what we output in terms of the breakdown of emotions that are present or absent in this scene. The closest 100, the emotion is present. And the closest to 0, the emotion is absent. This is actually pretty good, and we've used this to do a couple pretty cool things. Let's see. One of these things, as we did with the IBC conference, the IBC Accelerator last year, was to try to understand bias in news and try to detect bias in news. And here we've looked at how 3 news organizations, Reuters, Fox News, and Al Jazeera, were treating the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020 and 2021. And as you can see, in looking at sort of what emotions were present or absent in that coverage. And as you can see, this is pretty cool because, for example, Fox News Fox News Al Jazeera sounded a lot more depressed about the Black Lives Matter movement than Reuters. Fox News fairly predictably was a lot more neurotic than Reuters and Al Jazeera. And so this is an example of how we can use AI and machine learning to not make judgments about how good or bad something is, how good or bad a script is or a piece of content is, but just to give those who create, produce, and distribute this content a lot of contextual data about how this content is compared to other content. Currently, all these conversations are very difficult because there's really no metric, there's really no unified language to talk about content. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create a language that everybody can speak. It's a machine language that everybody can speak to try to understand content a little bit more contextually. We did other things with this emotional tonality parser. This was something we did for one of the ETC members, looking at which tonalities were the best performing in the Super Bowl coverage in 2021. And you can see the winning tonalities in the Super Bowl coverage for this sports network was aggressive type A, melancholy, and sarcasm. And the losing tonalities were being happy, energetic, and having a sexual focus. All right, so these are the things that, again, we can, sort of attach these emotions to specific words, right? And so this, again, is one of the other example of using machine learning to try to optimize content creation and content production. Okay. So the opportunities are not just in making more money or optimizing content. We're really also trying to explore our ability to use this capacity to analyze the DNA of narrative and the DNA of characters represented in media narrative to identify bias. This is what we call Project Hattie. It's a very exploratory project, but the hypothesis is that we could potentially use these tools, these narrative analysis tools, to identify certain archetypes of certain minorities that are biased, right? And the idea is, can we find narrative domains, character arcs, archetypes of certain minority characters that have patterns, right? And trying to see if we can break those patterns. So, Project Hattie is ongoing. Once again, it's very exploratory, but we're really interested in trying to understand the implications of having this tool to extract, very, very deep narrative DNA of any media content, to try to surface whether or not there's patterns and archetypes and biases of minority characters. We're not doing this just on text. Our ambition with the Wittenberg project is to classify everything, right? Can we classify the composition? Can we classify the amount of movement in the frame? Can we classify the edit pace? Can we classify the tonality of music? And the idea there is to, once again, create a machine language for content, is to create the ability to parse content for attributes of narrative that are very, very deep, much, much deeper than the ones that we have today. And this can be used in a variety of environments, right? Things like digital asset management, ability to search your content for semantic metadata. Show me all of the scenes where a female lead is smoking a cigarette while getting her power back, right? Things like that. Things that are not possible today. We're really trying to make it possible, all the way to content recommendations. Suddenly, if you can make content recommendations based on, sorry, my dog is like is playing in the background. If you can build content recommendation model based on very, very deep narrative attributes of the content, things like color schemes, right? Things like certain character archetypes, things like emotional tonalities of certain character leads, then you can get very, very deep in understanding that cognitive relationship that audiences have with content. So we're not just researching, right? We're building. We've built an application that has a lot of data, a lot of intelligence, and also we're trying to innovate in the way this data is delivered to the users. We're trying to create sort of an Alexa for media analysis tool, where it's just a question and answer tool, versus we're trying to get the industry past the dashboard era into more the Jarvis era. The idea is, if we're serious about using artificial intelligence and machine learning to make more data-driven decisions in any industry, not just the media industry, the way these insights are being delivered and consumed has to change. Right? We have to try to go past the dashboard era into an era where people that have questions can find those answers by just asking those questions in plain English and receive those answers in plain English. So this is the other way that we are also innovating. We're really trying to create a brand new interface and a brand new way for users and consumer of data to really use it. And we're applying this in a variety of contexts, as I mentioned, right? We have around a dozen studios and brands that are using these tools in everywhere from audience segmentation, demand prediction, auditing their brand, right, and audience, and augmenting their audience, trying to understand what part of their marketing spend is working or not working, and also creative strategy and product design. How do you create products and content from data versus having an intuition and throwing it out there and taking a lot of risk, trying to see if there's an opportunity to use data at the creative stage. So here's an example of that. So this is a representation of the daily mentions of 5 titles on Reddit between October 2018 to June 2019, looking at the breakdown of conversations on Reddit between Godzilla, King of the Monsters, John Wick 3, Pikachu, Aladdin, and Avengers. And what we're doing here is we're really trying to understand in the windowing and dating and scheduling use case, you know, which we know is a really, really big part of success, how much cannibalization exists between releases that are too close to one another. In this case, we have found out that Godzilla King of the Monster really got hit pretty bad by being released so closely to John Wick 3 because the fan bases had a lot of overlap, right? So fans had to make a decision between going to see one or the other, and a lot of fans decided to go to John Wick 3 and not Godzilla King of the Monsters. And so we're using this now to try to understand, try to map affinities across these franchises and make sure that if there's 2 releases of Godzilla King of the Monster and a John Wick release, they are sufficiently far apart that the fans don't have to make a decision about seeing one or the other. And this is a very, very simple thing, right? So the other thing I wanted to mention is, you know, it doesn't need to be AI. And in a lot of cases, it really isn't, right? Just some very, very simple mention counts like this, which is barely AI, or maybe not at all, can go a long way in creating value uh, for end users, especially in the media industry. So most of the time, the stuff that we do is very light AI, and we do a lot of also obviously R&D into the next stage of these kinds of technologies. But very, very simple things can have a big impact. So for example, this is something that we did on TikTok, looking at, and this is definitely more sophisticated, but what we looked at is we looked at for each of the streamers on TikTok, um, who are the people who are fans of the streamers and who are talking about the streamers, uh, who else are they talking about? And then we looked at, you know, are fans of HBO Max and Disney Plus talking about how much fans of HBO Max and Disney Plus are talking about HBO Max or Disney Plus shows. And we found some really interesting things. Um, so what we call the TikTok winners are those whose fan bases are talking about mostly their own shows. And the losers are the streamers whose fan bases are talking about shows on other streamers. So for example, Netflix, Disney Plus, and Peacock fans on TikTok are uh, you know, their conversations, their interests are in big proportion the shows of Netflix, Disney, and Peacock, right? So the Netflix, Disney, and Peacock fandoms on TikTok are really loyal to the shows and the talent of Netflix, Disney, and Peacock. Now, HBO Max and Paramount Plus, on the other hand, their fans are talking about shows on other streamers. And so I'll show you a little bit what that means concretely. All right, so this is what HBO Max's audiences love on TikTok. And as you can see, first of all, one of the things that we were very surprised with is that across the streamers, there's a huge interest in news. But here in this case, for HBO Max fans, we found a lot of Disney Plus IP and a lot of Paramount Plus Viacom IP, right? Very, very little fans of HBO Max on TikTok were talking about HBO Max shows or talent. Now, on the other hand, Disney Plus fans on TikTok really were talking about a lot of Disney shows and a lot of Disney shows and talent. Also, Disney Plus audiences on TikTok were really put a lot of attention towards Latinx personalities, TikTok person in and out of TikTok, right? So we saw that there was a very, very strong Latinx fan base in the Disney Plus fans on TikTok. Again, this is potentially interesting in trying to understand if you're, one of these streamers and you're trying to put together your content strategy. It is useful, and you're targeting, obviously, TikTok audiences are very prized audiences. You're targeting these audiences. It can be useful to look at the data into, okay, what is the stuff that they're really, really interested in, right? What is the stuff, like what should we be putting in production to really draw them in? Another example of what we did is to look at the viral pathways here. Okay, sorry. This is a little bit wonky. Okay, so the other thing that we did is to look for the boys at which fan communities on Twitter were more influential in activating other communities about the show The Boys on Amazon Studios. Looking at the network dynamics and the natural language processing, the conversations, right? Using CNA and NLP, we were able to show that Marvel fans and fans of the video game Fortnite were very influential in activating fans of the DC cinematic universe and the general horror fans about the show The Boys. So here the idea is to be able to know, to have more data-driven insights about which of these digital communities to activate first, because you know that they're deeply embedded and deeply influential in other communities, that if you get activated, they will activate other communities, right? Again, it's the idea of, like, is there any way that we can sort of engineer some virality in our marketing campaign? So we're doing a ton of that. Obviously, this is really interesting to studios and brands. Similarly, looking at sort of what audiences should be leaning into the boys versus the audiences that are leaning into the boys, and looking at where the white spaces are, right? So here, for example, all the audiences on Reddit and Twitter that are in green are the audiences that are really leaning into the show The Boys, and all the audiences that are in red, and there's a bunch of them, are not leaning as much as they should be into the show. Again, and this is an opportunity maybe for the marketing department to look at these audience segments, try to figure out how to activate them. And we have tools to do that as well, where we can go into the language, right, and look at every single community by community, and look at the language and find out which attributes of the show they like or dislike. So in green here is the positive sentiment polarity around each of these attributes of the show, these characters, and in red are the negative sentiment polarity. So here the anime fans on Twitter really dislike the plot. They actually are very polarized, positively and negatively, about the plot of The Boys. They really dislike the cast. The Marvel fans, on the other hand, on Twitter, really like the plot, and the LGBTQ Twitter fans also really like the plot. So this is an interesting tool for people to really understand what we're, how to activate certain segments. And so this is kind of all the time we have for today, but feel free to get in touch if you have any questions. This is definitely still very exploratory and R&D, but we're getting more and more pull into the media and entertainment industry for using these in marketing and content development.